Thank you all. Dr. Lane, I have a lot of, I'm from Louisiana, I have a lot of petrochemical refineries. They have a real interest in decarbonization. And I gather that some of the industry in my state are actually, Dow and I think Air Liquide are looking at fusion as a way to decarbonize. Any comment upon that? If somebody was watching from back home, speak to that, please.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. So, we have a number of different private sector, entities that are pursuing fusion in different ways and different approaches to fusion energy. I think what's exciting right now is what you're seeing is the beginning of convergence between the public and private sector, which is enabling for us to be able to leverage the public sector know-how and expertise to be able to truly accelerate our pace towards fusion energy. Now, of course, as you talk about timelines, I mentioned this in my remarks earlier. For us to reach fusion energy at a decadal time frame, we do have to close out the remainder science and technology gaps that do exist. There are aspects of the technology, for instance, that the private sector is aggressively going after, and in fact, there are designs and prototypes that are being built at a rate of 1.5 to 2 years, which is an incredible pace. To see that in the private sector. And so I see that the question in terms of the timeline is one where as long as we can build that bridge between the public and private, we're going to be able to get the expertise needed on some of the outstanding gaps that are needed for us to get there in a decadal time.
By the way, your name would fit right at home in Louisiana.
I know. Alain, it's a French name, yes.
Alain and Jean Paul, you know what I'm saying?
Right. That's right. Thank you very much for pronouncing it like that.
So we are talking about USG investment. But I'm hearing from you that there's significant private investment. And everybody's nodding their head. So to what degree is that private investment supplanting or at least augmenting? Again, if we're looking at how do we invest, we want to do it wisely.
Yeah, right.
And so to what degree is that private investment, that private public, I mean, Dow really wants to do this, Air Liquide really wants to do this, et cetera. Can we take that into account to say, well, wait a second, in competing priorities, we know private sector is really stepping up, that sort of thing.
Let me maybe answer this question this way, Senator, and I think this is a great question that, I'd like my colleagues here also to address. It's a question of being very thoughtful, methodical, and strategic as to how those investments are made. The questions we're asking right now in our public programs precisely this. In a dialogue with the private sector, where are the common gaps that many of, for example, our private sector companies are in fact stepping up and saying, here's a common gap that right now our investments are very much focused on the development of our technology specifically, but there are common gaps that we need help. And this is where the government's coming in very aggressively to say, look, let's look at our program, let's make sure we're realigned towards those gaps and make sure we aggressively invest in them.
There's some concern that China might be spending more on this, but that would be CCP / they are China Inc. Okay, my understanding is that there is no public-private, it is China Inc. Yeah. Whereas in our case, we're speaking about USG, but we are also having public investment, and then I know that we're part of that French initiative in which there's other countries that are there. Yeah. So put that all together, and how much should we be concerned that China Inc. is spending more than we, as opposed to no, if you put it all together, we're hitting it right.
Yeah, this is a great question. There is a significant investment needed to translate fusion technology. There's no question about that, right?
Because the private sector is helping to translate, right?
That's right. But the question is more of how you prioritize those investments, right? And the key piece here is, again, making sure we take advantage of that public and private exchange and connection.
But my question, I get that.
Okay.
My question is, if X amount of money is spent, and let's assume that we're actually wise and we use our federal dollars to fill in the gap between what the private sector is doing. Sure. And we know that we're part of this multinational initiative in France, which we all share the technology. Mm-hmm. I think we want to know how to prioritize our spending.
Sure.
We don't want to fall behind. But wait a second. No, between the private sector and our international partners, plus what we're doing okay. Yeah. No one ever says we're doing okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I think this is a fantastic topic to bring up because I'll say that what matters the most for us right now when you talk specifically about a race with China is the amount of money that China is spending on commercially relevant programs, right? And so for us, I can speak for Helion specifically, we're looking at the race that begins after we demonstrate, and that's building out the supply chain here in the United States and with our allies to make sure we can deploy at scale to actually win this race with China. But also looking at how we can utilize the funding that already exists within the Department of Energy to focus more on applied material research and development. Again, commercially relevant R&D that's going to help these machines that we're trying to deploy now. And Fusion Industry Association has done some fantastic work on actually breaking down what the spending looks like.
So I think what I'm hearing from you is that it's not only that, of course, everybody always wants more money authorized.
Right.
And everybody always wants more appropriated.
Yes.
But our oversight could also be directed towards making sure that the money is spent wisely.
Precisely. I think that we certainly, as you say, more money is always nice. But yes, I think that there are ways that we could better strategically utilize what we already have. Yes.
Sir?
Great, thanks, Senator. I think another really important thing to think about when it comes to federal funding and the private fusion industry is really the multiplicative effect of federal investment into private fusion companies. Early stage grants can help take innovative fusion concepts that otherwise might struggle in private markets and help them get to the level of demonstration where they can go out and actually get VC funding for their ideas, or help them demonstrate early stage technologies that then can enter into the National Lab Program for other grants. And also getting a grant from a DOE program like the DOE's milestone program for fusion can have a huge impact on companies to really give private investors some confidence that the experts at DOE have looked at this technology, they think there's something there worth investing in, so it can have a huge impact in helping to bring even more private capital, I think, into the private fusion space.
So you're adding nuance to what Dr. Alon said, is that it'll put a little French inflection on it. Dr. Alon said, in terms of doing the common gap, and what Ms. Stevens said, okay, we've got to commercialize, and you're putting a little bit more of a drill down. Here's a specific place to plant that seed corn more effectively.
Exactly, Senator. And I think the other thing is really identifying those cross-cutting issues like materials research, like fusion fuel cycle, like tritium handling, these things that are going to be needed for almost every company in the fusion sector that might be too large of a lift for any one company to do alone. But if we can really use...
But I'm sorry, one
Yeah.
more question. But we have this international consortium that is doing it in France. I assume that they're all doing this sort of thing. Do we need to reinvent that?
So the international consortium is really going to be focused on scientific demonstration of kind of a net fusion energy machine. It very much is a scientific demonstration device. It might not necessarily go as far into some of the advanced materials research and commercially relevant technology development that were needed.
If I may add to this point, Senator, to realize fusion energy, it's going to take multiple actions in parallel, not just, for example, that particular consortium they're talking about, but multiple ways for us to leverage international partnerships. This is why in our international partnership plan and strategy for the U.S., we're engaging like-minded nations to, in fact, address the very topics that we just talked about, but do it in a way where we can invest together and basically make sure that we're multiplying the resources that we already have.
Got it. Thank you very much for your forbearance, Mr. Chair. I yield.
Thank you.